Welcome, everybody, to Full-Time Fantasy Podcast. I am your co-host, Billy Muzio. With me, as always, is Jody Smith. We're going to be running through our running back rankings and our wide receiver rankings today, talking about 5 players from each, comparing them to ECR, and discussing why we either like them or don't like them. And especially as fantasy playoffs are now here, Jody, people are relying on rankings even more so than the times in the past to get into the playoffs. We don't want to be Dallas Cowboys. We don't want to be one and done. We want to win our fantasy championships and hopefully go home with some glory. Speaking of fantasy championships, Jody, I think we're in on the FSGA for the industry draft. We're into playoffs for one of the Kings Classics, or did both of them make it in?
No, the auction team didn't, even though we were fourth in points scored for the season, I think. We were third most points allowed. So all in all, and you're talking about an experts league with 14 teams, so it was a very barren situation on the waiver wire all year. But I think the team actually was pretty good. With a couple of breaks, we would have, snuck into the playoffs there. I don't know that it was a good enough roster to necessarily win, but when you're fourth in points out of 14 expert leagues, it's still something to walk away proud from, even though we went 6-8.
Yeah, so I went 500 in the redraft Kings Classic League. We beat Brad Evans the last week to get the last spot into the playoffs. The team has been shaping up, though. We had some ups and downs, never been able to find a consistent tight end all season. We traded for a tight end. The week we traded away Curtis Samuel for Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz got hurt and was out for the season. So we never even had a full tight end all season long. I did start Hunter Henry last week. I've been just streaming off the waiver wire, so that one was nice because we only won by a few points versus Evans, and that helped. So had I picked the stream wrong last week, then we wouldn't have made playoffs. But we're in the playoffs in that one. FSGA, we went 11-3, so we got the bye week. Nice relaxed week this week, just looking at the waivers, and that's all we have to do. And then we're going to be facing off versus the final 4 next week.
That was the league that you drafted, and you got panned by the Sirius XM crew, didn't you?
Yeah, everyone was totally against my draft. I actually went 0 running back in that, and it was a pretty heavy running back draft. I mean, I think I had it's a 14-team league as well. I had picked 13. Everybody except for one person went running back ahead of me. So we had 12 or 10 or 11 running backs off the board. The first wide receiver to go was Cooper Kupp. To 2 wide receivers, Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp went. So the rest of them were all running backs. So 10 running backs off the board in the first round. I came back around. I took Diggs, who was my wide receiver 2 for the season, but I took him and then came back around and got Devontae Adams at my round 2 pick, then came back around again. I didn't pick a running back in this league until like round 6 in a 14-teamer where you're starting 2. The first running back I selected was Tony Pollard. And then I just loaded up on handcuffs like Jeff Wilson, who's been starting for me most weeks. This week, not so much. Luckily, I'm in a bye week, so give him another week to get healthy. But just kind of threw a bunch of handcuffs on the team. I had Khalil Herbert for a while, so a lot of these guys came up strong for me. Pollard was clutch. I mean, he's been able to just start every single week for the most part on this roster and get away with it. And had Melvin Gordon at times, so he was able to get me through some tougher times at running back as well. But overall, very successful in our industry drafts. I think 2 out of 3 in the playoffs, not too bad. So full-time fantasy giving a nice, good rep for the industry. Let's move on. Running backs. Let's talk about Isiah Pacheco. So Pacheco this week gets the Houston Texans. ECR is running back 14. My rank is running back 11. Your rank is 13. So both higher than ECR. Since CEH went down week 11, Pacheco is the running back 9 in half-point PPR. He has 4 straight top 20 finishes, 3 inside the top 14. He's facing off against Houston this week, like I said earlier, who gives up the most fantasy points per game to the running back position. They average 29.5 fantasy points against them. They give it the fourth most yards per carry at 5.0. They also give up 141 rushing yards a game. That's a lot of that is game script as well, so you got to keep that in mind. And then they've given up 16 total touchdowns on the year, a little bit more than one per game. And we both know Kansas City is 14-point favorites in this match. We expect that pace of play to continue for Kansas City. We expect them to continue to run the ball and to continue the ground game against this bad run defense. What do you think about Pacheco outside of anything I just said?
Well, you have to love the matchup from a certain perspective. I mean, the concern comes in what Kansas City happened just this past week when they were up just like that, 27-0. Now, that could be a great thing for the running game, but it also could be an issue where they kind of phase him out a little bit to keep him healthy and from taking a lot of punishment, and they go with the Ronald Jones, or they go with Melvin Gordon, maybe if he's active this week. So that, it's a slight concern. But the only other concern you can have for Pacheco is he's not really catching a ton of passes. I know he's caught 1 and then 2 and then 3 passes the last 3 weeks. So you like to see that trending in the right direction. But overall, that's a job that goes to Jerick McKinnon. We saw how fantastic McKinnon was in that spot last year. And McKinnon also sometimes comes in and robs those short yardage and goal line type carries. But overall, I think both of us have Pacheco ranked about where he should be, which is a bottom tier RB1 or a very top end RB2 this week. It's just, I think we're only 2 spots behind. But again, best matchup you can possibly have for any fantasy running back this year has been against Houston, and that's what the Chiefs have. So, one thing you do like about Pacheco is he's kind of taken on that role for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, where he's actually becoming pretty decent in short yardage and all that. So, you could see a situation the Chiefs get really cute when it comes down to the goal line, which as a Patrick Mahomes, a person that has a lot of invested interest in Patrick Mahomes, I love to watch it, and I don't want to see them. I don't want to see him turn around and hand the ball off all that often. But it can be a concern if you're counting on that, multiple touchdowns out of Pacheco. But in this matchup, even without a ton of targets, even without a real chance of getting all the goal line looks, you still have to think that this is an easy 10, 12, 14 point outing for Pacheco, and that's probably like the floor.
Yep. I agree with everything you said there. Tony Pollard gets Jacksonville this week. Him and Zeke at both. But Tony Pollard has just been electric this year. ECR is 7. My rank is 6. Your rank is 6. 5 of the last 6 games, he has finished as the RB8 or higher. 2 of those games, he's finished as the RB1. He does get the Jags defense this week, who is the 9th worst versus the running back position. They give up 24.7 fantasy points per game to the running backs. They give the 4th most receiving yards per game. So this was an interesting one because we might see Zeke struggle a little bit more versus this offense, where Pollard is going to have a much easier match because he is typically the go-to in the passing down situations. They do give up the 10th most yards per reception to the running back as well. It's interesting because there's a lot of people who maybe roster both Zeke and both Pollard. What can you expect from Pollard this week, and what can you expect from Zeke as well?
Well, you got to stick with what's been working. What's interesting is that they've both been so effective lately. Once Zeke came back from missing those games, there was the concern that he would come back in and put Pollard back into maybe a 30 to 33% snap share. That's not what we've seen. Actually, Pollard has outsnapped Elliott in, I want to say, 5 out of 6 games or 5 out of 7, something like that. But they're using them brilliantly at this point right now. It's kind of like a thunder and lightning type thing, except both of them are 3 down backs that can come in, they can catch. Zeke's probably the preferred guy when it comes to pass protection and all that, but that's an element that probably won't matter all that much. I think at this point, if you were lucky enough, like you were in your FSGA team, where you got Pollard in a 0 RB situation, it's like you hit a home run, and I think he's appropriately ranked as a top 10 running back this week. What's interesting about the Jags is they haven't given up a touchdown reception to running backs all year. They're one of only like 4 teams that haven't done that, but they have given up like the second most receptions to the position. So, this is the kind of situation where I expect they'll stick with exactly what's been working. So you'll see pretty close to the snap edge will probably lean towards Pollard, but it won't be huge. It'll be something like, 52, 54% of the snaps, and Zeke will come in and maybe get short yardage reps, but sometimes they leave Pollard in to do that too. But I like both of them this week. I mean, why wouldn't you? The game's got a pretty enticing over under because there's some. It's actually pretty low scoring when you look at the totals this week. It's actually come down a little bit. So I think Pollard, you stick with him as a top 10 back, and Elliott, again at this point, if you have him available, I don't know that I feel 100% comfortable starting both of them, but the way they've been playing over the last month, I mean, they're both most starts as far as I'm concerned.
I have a league where I have been playing both of them for the last few weeks. It did run into some injuries, so it made
pretty well, huh?
Yeah, it made the decision a little easier once you ran into some injuries. But had I had a full healthy stable, it probably would have been a little bit more difficult to plug both in the lineup. But it has been working. Another running back who has been working last week, at least I should say, was J.K. Dobbins in his first game back from injury. He finished as the running back 10 in PPR leagues. He was 15 carries on the ground, 120 yards, and he did have a touchdown there. ECR right now is running back 22. My rank is 19. Your rank is 19, so both of us same here again. He immediately took the backfield reins, which I was not expecting in his first game back. Last week I was a little bit lower than consensus on him, not thinking that he would be thrown into that type of workload. He actually outsnapped Gus Edwards 42.6 to 34.4% of the snaps. He saw 35.7% of the rush share versus 31% for Gus Edwards, and he also got 2 red zone carries. He didn't see any targets, but he did see a 31.6% route rate versus Gus Edwards, who only saw 5%. We know Huntley left with concussion. He was cleared today, so that's good news for the team. That being said, I still expect them to run a lot because the Browns are giving up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to the running back position, 27.7 to be exact. It equates to roughly 113 rushing yards a game, 35 receiving yards, and they give up 5.2 yards per carry. And 17 touchdowns on the year as well. What can we expect from Dobbins? I saw Dr. Chow today post. Did you see all the bumps on his knee? They're like scars from the surgery and it not fully healing. It's a little concerning. And then that long breakaway run he had kind of looked like he was running with like a peg leg on it. He did not look fully healthy. He kind of had a little hitch to his step. What are we expecting from him this game? I mean, clearly they trusted him last week. Do you think they're just going to go right back to the well again this week?
Yes, I think that the situation you saw last week, it's what I would expect them to kind of go with because it worked. You saw some slight progress out of Deshaun Watson in the passing game, so that was, I guess, encouraging. But, Dobbins himself actually said he's not 100%, which is very unusual to have a player be that kind of honest because most players – they're out there. They want to play. They want to get out there and earn money. They want to get out there and secure their job. In particular, a player who is in a backfield that's going to divvy up carries amongst multiple different people every week. But assuming that they take the same approach, hey, every game that except for one game in his career that J.K. Dobbins has gotten double-digit carries, he's had double-digit PPR points. So at this point, that's kind of like the golden goose that we're looking for. As long as he gets 10 carries, he's been extremely productive. And like you said, Billy, in this game, if we can rack up 10 to 12 carries for Dobbins, forget the passing production because that's been hit and miss with Baltimore, mostly missed. They don't incorporate, and even with Lamar Jackson, they didn't throw a lot of passes to running backs. In particular, now you have a backup quarterback playing who himself hasn't officially cleared concussion protocol yet. So, yeah, I think you can see, you'll see a heavy dose of both Edwards and Dobbins. But like I think Dobbins leads the way again, gets an edge in snap counts. He's going to be 10, 12, 14 carries. And at that point, like I said, with his history and with this outstanding matchup against the Cleveland's 30th ranked run defense. You have to like him, and I think we have him ranked. Right there. What we're telling you is, he's a solid RB2, RB3.
Huntley did clear today, so that was good news. So second half of the day, it wasn't that long ago.
I was a little high on Huntley last week, just looking at his history, but I actually saw he played basically 5/8 of the game. 2.5 quarters. He actually got knocked out of the game in the third quarter. And if you took the pace he was playing at last week, and this is without any sort of much passing production, no touchdown. If you took the pace and extended it out over the 4 quarters, he would have been around QB 15, 14 last week. So, that's about where I ranked him.
So another player I want to talk about, Pierre Strong. It's looking like they will possibly not have Ramondre Stevenson this week. We're unsure about Damian Harris, but unlikely to Damian Harris. So we may see a tandem of rookie running backs here running the ball for New England. As of right now, ECR is at 58. My rank is 31. Your rank is at 18. We know Stevenson left with it. Oh, sorry. No.
I'm not quite as
53. Sorry, I had the wrong number in there. Jody's like, oh, I better go check my rankings real quick. As I mentioned earlier, Stevenson left with an ankle injury, but we did see a decent amount of snaps for Strong. He came in and saw 32.2% of snaps last week. He finished as running back 13. He finished week 13 as running back 11. He only saw 5 carries, but he exploded for 70 yards and a score. He did see 2 targets. He did catch both those targets for 20 yards. And he did take over the passing down work where he saw 6.3% of that target share versus Harris, who saw 0%. Yeah. They're facing the Las Vegas Raiders, as we all know, who are fairly tough against the run. They're actually middle of the pack, 17th best. They only give up about 4.0 yards per carry. That's 8th best in the NFL. However, this is where they're exploitable. They give up the 3rd most yards per reception at 8.6. They give up the most reception yards per game in the NFL at 53. They give up the 10th most rushing touchdowns with 10 and the 4th most receiving touchdowns with 4. What can we expect from Strong or Harris in this matchup if Harris and Stevenson are both out?
And overall, the Raiders have been much worse as a fantasy run defense than they actually have a legitimate defense. Oh, my ranking is significantly lower than yours just because I feel like Damian Harris is probably closer to playing than what we're hearing. And, of course, this is Bill Belichick in New England, so we can't trust anything. But my ranking currently is assuming that Stevenson is, in fact, out of the game. And, the interesting takeaway from Monday was that it was Kevin Harris who came in and was kind of, dominating touches as the RB2 there. It was before Strong finally got the opportunity. And, clearly the vast majority of that production came on that long TD run. But you hit it nicely when you talked about his target, because that's encouraging because if we do get confirmation that Stevenson is out, which is what I expect, and Harris is back, Harris has actually been underrated. Harris is on pace to have his most targets and receptions big time, for his whole career. So I don't know that Pierre Strong would necessarily be, come in as a change of pace guy. It would probably be more of a, committee type situation. But with the way they used Harris, he still is a guy that is coming off a 15 touchdown season. He still is leading the team in runs and touchdowns inside the 5-yard line. If Harris is back, my expectation is that he is, going to lead the way. That's why my current ranking of Pierre Strong is, lower. Of course, there's plenty of time for us to get some news and get some updates. So if we do, in fact, get confirmation that Harris is active, I might have Strong up a few more spots, but he's not a guy that I'm going to go out of my way because I just can't trust Bill Belichick. I just can't trust the way that.
So fancy me here. If Damian Harris is ruled out and it's only Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris, where would you rank these two?
Okay. Well, then at that point, you're talking he gets into top 30 range because at that point, with the explosiveness that we saw last week, the pass catching upside, the matchup in itself with Arizona is fantastic. at that point, I'm probably going to lean. If they're both out, I'm going to put Strong ahead of Damian Harris simply because of what we saw with him getting the targets last week. And like I said, he'll be in that. He'll be around. Let's just say, for the sake of things, RB 30 somewhere in that range sounds about right.
Okay. Let's move on. Bam Knight faces Detroit this week. ECR is 18. My rank is 18. Your rank is 18. So all of us in line with ECR. Since week 12, he's actually the running back 10, averaging 13.6 fantasy points per game and half-point PPR. He plays about 50% of the snaps every single game. He's been much more efficient than Carter. He's getting 39.1 fantasy points per every 100 snaps. He saw 77% of the rush share last week. He did give up the passing down role to Carter. Carter saw 13.6% of the target share, while Bam only saw 4.5%. This week they're facing Detroit. Detroit's been pretty tough on the ground. They're the 7th best, but they have given up the 5th most rushing touchdowns on the year with 13. And Bam is averaging right now 15 carries a game and has seen those carry numbers increase every single active game since taking over the role. What's your expectations this week of Bam Knight? And do you think that he is going to be able to put up another fantasy relevant game against this Detroit defense, who's actually pretty good against the run?
Yeah, you hit on the exact points that I had kind of scribbled down, that Detroit is actually, at least from a fantasy perspective, they're, kind of top 10 when it comes to limiting fantasy points to running backs. However, it's those 13 rushing touchdowns that kind of stand out because that's well below average. And you got to love what you've seen out of Zonovan. Just came out of nowhere, and they just feel like every week his role has just increased and it's gotten better. Another great point is it was a little discouraging to see Mike Carter come in and take most of that passing down work, because Zonovan showed in the previous games that he was more than capable in that area. But I'm really interested in this game from a standpoint of quarterback. I expect Mike White to be fine and to suit up for this game, but you have to worry about him taking a hit or getting knocked out of the game again after we saw him twice last week get knocked out. So I have Zonovan Knight. I was able to pick him up in the Scott Fish Bowl, which I've somehow advanced to. I think we're going in round 4.
Nice. Congratulations.
It's one of the few. I mean, most of my in-season leagues didn't do so great. But a few of them I'm still okay. But I have Knight in my starting lineup with confidence. This game has a sneaky shootout potential. I do have some concerns, and we'll talk about that in a little while with Detroit. But I kind of expect that the Jets to rely a little bit more on Knight this week and to take some pressure off of White, maybe try to protect him a little bit. So I feel pretty comfortable starting him. I think we both have him ranked in the exact same spot, and that's a RB 18. So obviously both of us feel like he's a solid start.
Okay, moving on to wide receiver. DeAndre Hopkins gets Denver this week. ECR is 13. My rank is 12. Your rank is 14, so ECR has a split down the middle. We all know Kyler tore his ACL last week early in the game, and it's now McCoy at helm. In McCoy's 2 starts this year, that was weeks 10 and 11, Hopkins finished as wide receiver 15 in both those matchups. Should we just leave him at 15 since that seems to be the trend here? Or can we, both have him up a little higher? Denver's been pretty tough in the secondary. They're the second best in the NFL, although they have been beaten in the slot, and Hopkins runs roughly 35% of his routes from the slot. And that being said as well, Denver has kind of, I don't know if it's a heart thing, but in the last 4 games, they have fallen to 9th overall inside, and that's also with opponents as well. But it just seemed like they have lost interest as a team, and especially that secondary in a couple of these games.
Well, yeah, now you just lost Kyler Murray, your quarterback for the season. Your general manager just stepped aside for medical reasons this week. So to me, it feels like it's pretty much fixed to be over for Cliff Kingsbury and for Arizona. And there's a very good chance, I feel like, they'll be starting over next year. So that kind of stuff clearly can creep into your players' minds and affect the play. More of a concern this week, like you mentioned, Billy, is the matchup with Denver, who is phenomenal this year, second best fantasy defense against wideouts, and Colt McCoy's passing numbers are actually roughly similar to what we saw out of Kyler Murray, but the touchdown production hasn't been there when he stepped in this year, which is a concern in particular against an elite defense like this. And this week the Broncos have the second lowest implied total of the entire slate at only 17 points. That's obviously a huge concern. Obviously DeAndre Hopkins, stud player. You're almost guaranteed putting him in your lineup. It was probably pretty good value for anyone that drafted him probably, in the middle rounds this year because of the suspension issue, and you've probably been using him. So I could see it being a situation where if he's only a guy you've been putting in as your flex spot, you could sit him. But I think most people that have DeAndre Hopkins this week, despite the matchup and despite the concerns with Arizona this week, you kind of have to keep trotting them out there.
Next receiver we'll talk about is Brandon Aiyuk, playing tonight in about an hour versus Seattle. ECR is 23. I'm at 18. You're at 26. So we're on opposite ends of this one. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. In the one game that Debo was out, week 8 versus Los Angeles Rams, Aiyuk finished as wide receiver 10 that week. We do have a different quarterback at helm. We have Brock Purdy, who's throwing the ball. You see that meme that I think I posted on Twitter where the Spider-Man, where it has the glasses and it fades from Montana to Purdy. Purdy's looking pretty good. So I'm not scared of the quarterback. I know he's banged up, but they're coming in now facing Seattle. Seattle is very tough, actually, in the secondary. Top 6 in the league versus wide receiver position. But, and this is the big one, they give the 8th most fantasy points in the slot. 280.9 on the year is what they've given up. Aiyuk runs 65% of his routes out of the slot. 489 of those 747 snaps have been out of the slot. He ran 87% route rate last week, 100% week 13. They got ahead against Tampa. That's why he was a little bit lower last week. Week 12, he saw 92% route rate. 80% of snaps last week. Again, that was the game script. 95% week 13, 97% week 12. What do you expect from Brandon Aiyuk? I'm curious to see why you're lower on him.
One of us needs to check our math on that slot rate because I have Aiyuk as about a quarter of the time he's in the slot. Now, of course, that can be game planned around if they want to get him away from outside cornerbacks. You could move him inside, but one of us needs to check into that. But regardless, the Seahawks, interesting secondary. Like you said, they've allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points this week. So by my rationale in looking at it, I'm expecting Aiyuk to spend more time on the perimeter, which means he'll be in the coverage with Tariq Woolen, who has 6 interceptions. He's Pro Football Focus's 17th rated running cornerback. That's why I'm a little lower on him, but it's not the only reason. I do also have concerns for Purdy. San Francisco has really struggled. They've gone 2-12 against the spread in Seattle. San Francisco's also dropped, I think, their last 5 against the spread on Thursday, something like that. I wrote it up in the full-time fantasy Thursday night preview. A lot of game trends, and this is Seattle. It's a desperate. It's more of a must-win situation for them. But this is Brock Purdy's first road start. We're talking about a rookie 7th rounder. It's his first primetime TV appearance. He's a little bit banged up. So to me, that's my concerns. I want to see how Purdy does in the situation with his first road start. I'm not completely off him. I just, like I said, I have some slight concerns. And because I have those concerns, I feel like Seattle covers in this game. I think it can be possibly a lower scoring, ugly type of game. So I'm just a little bit lower on Aiyuk. I'm hoping, as I've been rambling, that you were able to verify the
conflicting data. Actually, I just pulled from the 2 main sources I pulled data from. One showing that if the figure I gave you, and the other one is showing the figure that you gave me. So we're gonna need a third verification now as the tiebreaker. That's interesting that both sites are completely backwards.
Yes, that happens. I think I was looking at Pro Football Focus, who I generally look to when I'm trying to figure out wide receiver cornerback stuff and how often a guy spends on a perimeter versus inside. So That's
Yeah, interesting. We'll have to verify that one off air. We'll get back to that one. Jerry Judy, ECR 25, my rank 23, your rank 24, both of us slightly higher. Finished as the wide receiver 1 last week. Huge game. He caught 8 of 9 targets, 73 yards, and of course 3 scores. Most likely no Russell Wilson this week. Looks like it's going to be Brett Rippon time. How will Judy fare with Rippon? Can it be much worse than Wilson? That's the question, I guess. And then we all know Arizona gives up the most fantasy points, or let's say the most points per game in the NFL. This is NFL scoring, not fantasy points. 26.8 points a game is what they give up. Officially more than Detroit now by 0.1 on the year.
Yeah, but from a fantasy perspective, Arizona is right there in the middle. 16th most fantasy points allowed to receivers, so they've been very, very average. I'm approaching it with extreme caution, Bill, just because we don't know the quarterback situation right now. I would say it's almost guaranteed that Russell Wilson isn't going to play. And it's funny you could say, who would have thought this? Back in August and September, that we're having to argue: is Brett Rippon really a downgrade from Russell Wilson? And yeah, I'm going to say yes. When you go back and look at him, he's a downgrade. We finally actually had a decent game where had Russell Wilson not got concussed, maybe he would finally be ahead of the bathroom pace, or he'd be getting a little bit closer to having more touchdown passes than bathrooms. And clearly that's at risk of not happening. So I'm approaching everyone with Denver in the passing game with a little caution. However, the Broncos themselves, Judy and Dolkich are pretty much the only guys that feel like that were playing last week that are healthy this week, because even Kendall Hinton is now probably going to miss this game. So, you could see a really healthy percentage of targets go Jerry Judy's way, even with it being Brett Rippon, which means at this point, hey, you're probably setting him in. It feels like this feels like a pretty decent game for Latavius Murray, who's been a little disappointing over the last couple of games, but it feels like it could be an opportunity for him to finally come up and post another RB2 week.
Next up is DJ Chark. DJ Chark. ECR is 43. My rank is 40. You're 42. Since coming back from injury and playing full snaps, he has finished as wide receiver 44, 23, and wide receiver 5 in PPR leagues. He ran 85.7% of routes last week, 84.2 in week 13. 80% route rate last week, 86.1% in week 13. 20% target share last week. However, they get the New York Jets this coming week, who are the third best in the league versus the wide receiver position. They've only given up 10 touchdowns all year. This is the sixth best. And they've given up the second fewest receiving yards all season, 1,543 yards. That's it. Can Chark continue the streak, or does it end this week?
I have, a lot of concerns with Detroit's passing game this week, most likely because of what you just said, which is the fact that the Jets have a pair of outstanding coverage corners. And looking at Pro Football Focus, Ahmad Gardner, number 1 graded cornerback, and that is a rookie, tremendous. That's amazing. It's just frustrating here from Houston, because we had a chance, the Texans had a chance to draft him and decided to take Derek Stingley, who has been somewhat less effective than Gardner, considering he has the number 1 grade. But also, let's not forget the other perimeter cornerback, DJ Reed. Pro Football Focus grades him as their 15th cornerback. So you're talking about a pair of outstanding perimeter corners. So you feel like every time DJ Chark potentially is trying to run deep or get out from the outside there, that it's a potential problem. It definitely is one that favors the Jets in this offense. Not to mention that Jared Goff has been far more effective at home than he has on the road. I have some concerns with Detroit's passing game this week. That said, we still, Bill, you and I both have Chark ranked wide receiver 40 and wide receiver 42. So it's not like we're saying, he's a guy that you can't start. We're saying, hey, he's solid, wide receiver 4 or 5. Billy, I know you were one of the highest in the entire industry on him this summer. We talked about him, and you won me over. You sold me, so I moved him up on my rankings too. And it feels like it would have been nice, if he was a guy that you can't start. We're saying, hey, he's a solid wide receiver 4 or 5. Billy, I know you were one of the highest in the entire industry on him this summer. We talked about him, and you won me over. You sold me, so I moved him up on my rankings too. And it feels like validation had he stayed healthy, because
Yeah.
we've seen over since he's returned, we've seen some of that upside, and he's looked really, really good. That
Yeah.
said, like I said, there's some concerns this week for the Lions.
Yeah, I think if we would have got a full year from him, he probably would have been that wide receiver 3 range, which is where we had him ranked. We had him about 50 or 60 spots higher than most people did in our top 200 or 300, I should say. So it was definitely disappointing to see him get hurt, but a little bit validated seeing this last few weeks, the stretch he's had. Last player of the day, and then we'll hop into these start sit questions that we have piling up inside the chat. Drake London, ECR 37, my rank 33, your 38. Again, we're splitting ways here. Marcus Mariota is placed in IR. I think that's a good thing for London. It's Ritter time. Ritter was, in my opinion, the most NFL-ready quarterback coming into the draft out of college for this draft class. He went 3.10 in the draft. He has some mobility, so he runs a 4.52 40. Yards per attempt yards per attempt in college were 8.4. Early in camp is what I was kind of looking back at. I wanted to see any comments that we had seen from Drake London regarding Ritter, and a comment that I stumbled across was that he liked the ball that London threw better than what Ritter threw. Than what Mariota threw. So that was an interesting comment that I heard. So maybe they have a little bit of a built-in chemistry already from camp. It's been an up and down year so far for London. We've seen his highs, we've seen his lows. A lot of this, in my opinion, has been directly tied to Mariota, and as well as the lack of coaching, I should say, from this team. Last week we saw 12 targets, which was encouraging. 87% snap share, 88% route rate, 196 air yards. These metrics, to me, are indicative of future success. Seeing somebody on the field that much and having that much air yards is a good sign, and one of the best indications of fantasy points to come. Finished as wide receiver 20 on the week. What's your thoughts on him this week?
Yeah, the air yards number that you just quoted really stands out too. Yeah, we go back to when we were covering this spring, Billy, when we were doing our rookie scouting profiles. I agree with you on Ritter. I'm kind of surprised that he fell in the draft as late as he did. But from an athletic standpoint, from an arm standpoint, it felt like he's probably a significant upgrade from a passer than what we've seen out of Marcus Mariota. But you question the play calling there, where they've stubbornly refused to attempt forward passes so often when they have two top 10 players in Drake London and Kyle Pitts, and week after week we would see them go with 4 or 5 targets and to just disappear seemingly so. But I'm optimistic. I think I have London very cautiously graded, just because it's just complete unknown at this point. But the matchup is, it's kind of favorable. The Saints are, right around average against wide receivers from a fantasy perspective, but they've been doing that without Marshawn Lattimore now for a significant amount of time. So, that's actually, pretty impressive. But coming off a bye week, the Falcons and Ritter himself have had extra time to prepare for this game, this situation, and to, hopefully combat any butterflies or concerns. So I'm optimistic that it could be a good situation, but I'm approaching it, like I said, with caution, because it's such a complete unknown. It's trending in the right direction, though.
All right. That's all the players we're going to talk about tonight. Let's go ahead and hop into the chat here. I'll show the first one. Of course, the best comment that we've seen all year right here, Jody. Best hosts. Best show with the best host in fantasy football. Thank you, Jose, for the kind words. But moving on to questions. What's up, fellas? Full PPR. We need 2 running backs and 2 flexes for this week. Options are Saquon, Kamara, Kenneth Walker, Rashad White, Waddle, Godwin, Olave. Which 4 are you starting?
Oh, let's see if we can leave that up there so I can think about it for a minute. Walker, we hit on it kind of at the top of the show. There's some concerns there. Not only is it a horrible matchup, we don't know how healthy he is. As fantastic as he's been all year, if I knew him physically, if I knew that he was 90% or better of himself, the kid that we saw emerge after Rashad Penny went down, he'd be, a no doubt starter every week, even if it was the 49ers or the 85 Bears, whatever. You would just plug and play. Right now, I have Barkley and Kamara ranked ahead of him, even though you got to question how healthy, Barkley really is right now, and Kamara's kind of been a bit of a disappointment over the last, if not all season, definitely over like the last month or so. He's actually been pretty quiet. So I don't see how you can start Rachaad White at this point with him basically splitting carries with Fournette. At this point, unless Fournette were somehow out of this game, then you could go that direction again. But it just comes down from me to pure touches, and that is your first two guys there from a running back perspective, and then at receiver. Wow. We were just talking about the Falcons game. So Atlanta, that's interesting for Olave. I think you kind of have them ranked correctly, like when you look at it. I mean, if I'm picking the four guys, it's got to be two of each. I'm going with your top two running backs there, and Waddle and Godwin, consistently have been pretty much better options from a week-to-week perspective than Olave. But
I agree with you here, Jody. I have Saquon and Kamara firmly ahead of Walker and Rachaad White. And then at receiver, although I love Olave's matchup this week, I like Waddle and Godwin more, and the usage that we're going to see from them. I think also we're going to have a pretty heavily targeted game, I think, from Godwin, because the Bengals actually are pretty exploitable in the slot. They're much tougher out wide than they are, and so I expect that to be a little bit more of a Godwin game. So I have Godwin at 16, I have Waddle at 14, and I have Olave right now at 25. Olave probably bumps up once or two spots depending upon some news that we have.
One thing, I don't feel like snow is supposed to be a factor in Buffalo for this game, but it's something to watch. As we get closer to that game time, if you're seeing a really heavy forecast for snow, that could have a big impact on not only just Miami, but it could have a big impact on the entire passing offense for them if it's a lot of snow. I'm not expecting it, though. That's why I still feel like right now Waddle's the way to go.
Okay, over under 12.5 points today from Walker.
PPR points. So I have him as a mid-range, in the mid-20s. I think in my personal rankings, I have him around RB 25. That is me being cautious because I know that he's an elite player. It's a terrible matchup, though. With the biggest concern, I don't want to read too much into matchups. And, this is a must-win game for Seattle. And I actually am optimistic that not only are they going to cover, but I think they can outright win this game. I think it'll be close. It's just a concern of his health. Pete Carroll's not the most forthcoming guy when it comes to that kind of stuff either. So it's a little tricky. It's a little hard to touch him. So, jumping versus running backs, I'm just curious if Billy take it for a second. I'm going to see how often San Francisco's given up 12.5 PPR points to.
I'm going to say it's probably pretty low. They're the most stout run defense in the NFL.
They haven't given up 60 rushing yards all year to any one running back. So, 12.5. Let's see. 1, 2.
So he would have to have like 50 yards and a touchdown to get that, or he'd have to have at least a couple catches.
5 times this year, a running back has scored more than 12.5 PPR points against San Francisco. That was Rachaad White. James
That was a late
Conner.
touchdown.
James Conner, who scored a touchdown. Austin Eckler, who does that against everybody. Christian McCaffrey. And Melvin Gordon back in week 3, who ran one in. He only had 12 for 20.
I'm going to take the under here, Jody.
Feels like that's the safe bet.
Okay. Next one we have is, let me see here. Needing help on which quarterback to start: Trevor Lawrence, Rodgers, Danny Dimes, or Mike White?
Trevor Lawrence, he's clearly been your most consistent and best player at this point. Aaron Rodgers, I wouldn't feel very comfortable starting him at all. Same thing with Danny
Danny
Dimes. I mean,
Dimes.
he's got that rushing upside, but that's about where he's limited. And Mike White, best matchup clearly goes to him, but how healthy is he? I don't see how.
He's a tough son of a bitch. I think he's going to gut it out.
I think he'll be fine too, but like I said, he could take one hit in the midsection that could knock in that doesn't even seem like anything, or get pushed out of bounds, and that could before you know it, we'll see Zach Wilson in, which that'd be a disaster for all of us. But it's a fantasy playoffs, and I think you generally don't want to overanalyze things too much, so you go with the guys who probably got you there, and that's Lawrence.
Yep, I have Lawrence right now at quarterback 10. Mike White's actually at 11, so I have Mike White ahead of Danny Dimes and Rodgers this week. Rodgers I have right now at 18, and then I have Danny Dimes at 16.
I have Lawrence at 9 and White at 11.
Yep. So I think it's even though Lawrence has a tough matchup, I still like him this week ahead of Mike White. You think Kittle goes over or under 39.5 yards?
Kittle, very good matchup. The Seahawks have routinely been gouged by tight ends all season, but the concern is usage. He hasn't gotten a ton of targets with Brock Purdy, but maybe with Debo being out. This feels like I can't get. There's a couple of guys that I manage to get wrong all the time, and he's one of them, because it seems like every week I elevate George Kittle as a top 3 or top 4 tight end. Is one of them weeks when he's got 2 catches for 26 yards, and every week I'm like, okay, well they're just not using it. I'm dropping him down to tight end 10. That's when he catches 5 for 71 and a touchdown. But
I think for the season I'm like top 10 in every single category except tight end. It's like 90th or something like that. So take it for a grain of salt, but I'm going to say Kittle goes over 39.5.
I like over too.
I like the matchup. They give up I think the second most to the position. So I'm going to roll with it. I moved up Kittle to number 2 this week. So that just means that he's going to finish at like 22 and we're all screwed. So that's been my tight end rankings for the year. That's in a nutshell. Moving on, we have half point PPR flex Walker versus SF or Elijah Moore versus Detroit. Jody?
Interesting with you love the matchup for Elijah Moore, especially with Corey Davis looking like he's probably not going to play. But like I said, the point you get a little concerned with both of these situations have a little bit of concern for me. That's Mike White's health. I have to assume that he's healthy, that they're trotting him out there. It's a must-win game for the Jets.
You saw 10 targets last week too.
Their playoff games likely. Like I said, yeah, but with Corey Davis gone, I'm on board with Elijah Moore. I really kind of like him this week, but I don't know that I have the heart to sit Ken Walker, because Kenneth Walker has just been absolutely tremendous, and that's a tough call.
Don't have the cojones to do it, huh?
No, it's only half PPR. Where if it was full PPR, I might.
Yeah, that's true.
More, easily towards Elijah Moore. I feel like the upside play is Elijah Moore, and I think the safer play is probably Walker.
I'm on board with that. That's exactly how I was going to answer
it. Cut it out tonight, and I couldn't blame you. Then leave Walker out and take your chances.
I was literally going to say, if you're looking for a home run, I'm playing Elijah Moore. If you want to play it safe, go ahead and play Walker. But I lean Elijah Moore in this situation. He saw 10 targets last week. Love the matchup. I like Mike White. The guy's got swag. He's out there throwing the ball. I like it.
Probably no Corey Davis.
Yep. So I like Elijah Moore this week, but I'm also down on Walker versus ECR as well. Christian Watson or Amari Cooper this week? That's a good question.
Ooh.
I have them really close together.
I mean, how do you sit Christian Watson?
You can't.
Yeah, the guy just keeps scoring, and Cooper's a little bit banged up right now. I don't think it's a huge concern, but
he doesn't play well when he's banged up, though.
Yeah, and his play's kind of dropped off a little bit since Deshaun Watson's been under center.
Yeah.
So
I lean Watson here. I just don't think you can sit him. He's scored like every single week. It's all he does is catch touchdowns. He's like the Jamal Williams
he's
of receivers.
The new Chris Carter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think you like in my rankings right now reflect they have Amari Cooper 2 spots ahead of him, but that'll change. I will have probably Amari Cooper near that 25, 26 spot. Watson will probably move to 22 range, if not higher.
Baltimore's secondary has improved over the last several weeks against wide receivers, and you're looking at an over/under of just 38 in that game. So I hate to say, sit Cooper, but like I said, I mean, I don't know. I like the safe touchdown consistency of Watson.
Okay. Next one is Dobbins or Swift.
Yeah, so we're talking about how good the Jets defense has been, against the pass, and we're kind of. It was just so frustrating to watch, last week for Detroit when, it's a game that they won. It's a game the offense was humming pretty well, but both Jamal Williams and Swift weren't all that involved, and both had kind of, disappointing games. I still feel like he feels like the right play from a perspective of he's going to be involved as a receiver, which is something that Dobbins is not likely to do. Like I said earlier, although how good Dobbins has been when he's gotten double-digit touches, so feels like if that's where you go here, Dobbins with 10 to 12 touches. I don't know. Billy, do you feel like Swift can get there?
He saw not necessarily a reduced snap count last week because of, I think it was game script related, but he did see less snaps to Jamal last week again. They got Justin Jackson involved last week again, but again, I think that was all game script based on the score of the game. I like Swift as the talent. I don't fully trust how much they get him involved on a week-to-week basis. Dobbins, though, love the matchup versus Cleveland. We talked about him earlier in the show. I lean Dobbins in this scenario just because of the matchup, and I think they're going to just run the shit out of the ball. That being said, the knee kind of scares me, and so it's kind of one of those things where the usage of Swift scares me, but the knee scares me for Dobbins.
I'm looking at my personal rankings, and I do have Dobbins 4 spots ahead of Swift.
Yep, that's about where I have him too, about 3 or 4 spots. So I lean Dobbins in the scenario pretty much only due to the matchup. If it was a tougher matchup, I'd probably go Swift, but because it's Cleveland, I'm leaning Dobbins. Next one we have is Waddle or Pittman. This was closer than people think, I think. Everyone's going to say Waddle, but there's a real case to be made for Pittman this week.
Yeah, that's, again, like you said, the first thing will be, like I said, I don't feel like weather's supposed to be a factor there in Buffalo, but it's something that, you need to check on. Let me see what my rankings here. I have Waddle up pretty high. I have him around wide. Yeah, so he's 12th. And Pittman is 25. So that he'll probably sneak up here. It's a pretty good matchup for the Colts against the Vikings, who have really tailed off against receivers.
And it's a dome game.
Yeah, like Billy said, it should probably be a little bit closer, but right now I have Waddle pretty comfortably ahead of him.
Okay. Next one we have is Akers or Dobbins or Swift. So we just answered Dobbins or Swift, so let's do Akers versus Dobbins. For me, it's pretty clearly Dobbins.
Cam Akers?
Yep.
Yeah, you can't.
Okay.
He's a distant third on that.
Next one is Chris Moore, Adam Thielen, Aiyuk, Zay Jones, Drake London, pick 3.
What was I looking at with I know there was a reason that I was pretty cool on Adam Thielen this week. Billy, what is it? Help me think why I was lower on a guy. It was something I read or something I looked at.
Because Indy's good. They have a good secondary.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. So the Colts have a pair of outstanding perimeter cornerbacks. Now, they are exploitable from inside. So, Thielen might not necessarily be impacted too much from that, but still, it's not a matchup to necessarily go out of your way to make sure you get him in your lineup. So Aiyuk, I'm a little lower than ECR on Aiyuk. However, he's still a wide receiver 25, wide receiver 26 for me this week, so that's significantly higher than Thielen. Zay Jones, like his usage, but he
Dallas
doesn't
is
have
tough too.
yeah, Dallas is. Why are we? I mean, Chris Moore, obviously least talented of the group. However, he's most likely going to be Houston's wide receiver one again in a matchup where they're going to be seeing a ton of come from behind, fantasy garbage, favorable game script type situation. That said, if you're relying on that, that feels problematic. And Drake London, we talked about him quite a bit earlier. I'm really excited to see how the Falcons start using him. So, to me, like I said, it comes down to three. I feel like you're sticking with Thielen and Aiyuk. Here's your safest bets, and then it's going to come down to. I'll look at my personal rankings here right now. Moore, Jones, and London. As Billy's talking, I'll look at where they are ranked.
I'm going to go London, Ayuk, and Thielen in this matchup. I like Drake London this week. I'm higher on ECR versus Drake London. We talked about him earlier as well.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like it as an upside shot. It's more of a ceiling play as well. So I think London has a decent matchup, and with Ritter at helm, I think that they want to see what the rookie has. They're going to let him air it out a little bit more. So I like Drake London this week.
I have London 10 spots ahead of Chris Moore currently. And Zay Jones is right around the same area. So
Flip a coin.
mm-hmm.
ETN or Foreman? ETN for me.
Yeah, gosh.
And it breaks down to snap share is what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
ETN's been less than stellar, but he's still seeing about 80% of snaps, or Foreman's seeing about 40% or 30.
And there's the key there. ETN is the better bet to be on the field and to accumulate more overall touches, whereas Foreman has maybe been better over the last couple of games, but now he's kind of seeing himself in a almost 60-40 or 55-45 type situation with Chuba Hubbard, and even Blackshear is even getting involved too. So, yeah, it feels like go here with the safer volume.
Okay, we got time for about 2, maybe 3 more questions, or we can go through and just do these rapid fire. Which one do you prefer? There's about 8 or 9, maybe 10 questions in there.
Well, we got game's about to kick off, so we gotta.
Let's do rapid fire. So a lot of these players we've already talked about. So let's just do rapid fire so everybody gets their question answered. Aiyuk or Pittman?
I've still got Aiyuk a little bit higher.
Okay, Eileen Pittman in this scenario. Barkley or Connor? Connor gets Denver. Barkley gets Washington.
I'm going to lean Saquon here because of the matchup.
Okay, I lean Saquon as well, although Connor may see a large workload, so that's a close one. But I lean Barkley. Mike White or Geno?
I have them back to back. I mean, this is basically a coin flip, terrible matchup for Geno, but he's been pretty good at home. Better matchup for Mike White. So look at my rankings. I think I've got them back to back. Honestly, just got to remember which one's ahead.
I moved Mike White ahead of him this week.
Actually, did too. Yeah, I have White at 11.
Hey, okay, nice. Where do you have Brock Purdy? Because it's the same game. I'm just curious.
QB 18.
Oh, come on. How you going to move Joe Montana up down like that?
I mean, we hit on it earlier. I have a few concerns.
Aiyuk or Christian Watson? I don't think you can sit Christian Watson right now.
No, I don't. I don't see how you. I don't see how you sit him.
Okay, Cordero Patterson, or is he better with Ritter? Yes or no?
Well, the Falcons. I don't know that they'll necessarily stop the way that they're using their running backs, which has actually been pretty effective for them. You can only hope that they throw them more passes, and if that's a thing, then that'll actually help Patterson.
Okay. Walker or DPJ? I go DPJ.
We're talking Ken Walker.
I'm assuming so. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a there's a decent chance that Peoples-Jones, who's been one of the most consistent.
Rapid fire, Jody. Rapid fire.
Oh, let's go with the DPJ. Yeah,
All right. Swift or Walker? Rapid fire.
Swift.
Okay. And I go Swift as well. Rapid fire, Green Bay defense or Denver defense?
Denver.
Denver as well for me, too. Rapid fire, we already did that one. Oh, no, so he added another player in there. Rapid fire, pick 3, Chris Moore, Thielen, Aiyuk, Zay Jones, Drake, or Elijah Moore. He added Elijah Moore to that mix.
Add Elijah Moore now.
Okay. Yep. I'd go Aiyuk, Elijah Moore in London. And, nope, that's not a question. Not the best matchup. Is 49ers defense still must start? Yes, absolutely. 49ers defense, is it a must start still?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. And then the last question of the night, and then we're out of here. Deep league, Purdy versus Seattle or Tanny versus Chargers? Or Matt Ryan versus Minnesota. I'm rocking with Purdy, man. I'm doing it.
Billy's going with Purdy. Yeah, those other two just have such low floors.
Though Matt Ryan's playing in the Dome this week, it's pretty much a home game then.
Okay, I'll give him the slight edge.
So you're going to go Matt Ryan. I'm going to go Purdy. That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in.
I'm good about it.
We're out of here. Have a good night. Take care.